And sometimes he was a good winner, but sometimes a sore loser.
What if I told you that James Burton has finally decided to speak his heart about Elvis Presley? He wasn't just any guitarist. He was the one the king trusted to take the spotlight when he said, "Play it." Now, at 85 years old, this legendary musician is sharing stories he's kept quiet for decades. From private moments backstage to deep emotional memories, James is telling the truth about what Elvis was like away from the stage. Was Elvis the generous, kind man fans believed he was? What mattered most to him? And what did James see during Elvis's final days? Stay tuned to find out. The rise of James Burton.
And sometimes he was a good winner, but sometimes a sore loser.
James Burton's fingers seemed born to dance across a guitar. From the time he was just a boy in Louisiana, he had a feel for music that couldn't be taught, and in his case, it wasn't. James was completely self-taught, learning by ear and feel, picking up his guitar and letting it guide him. He didn't need fancy lessons. He had natural talent and a deep love for music. Born on August 21, 1939 in the small town of Dubberly, Louisiana, James grew up in a humble household with parents Guy and Lola Burton. Life in the South wasn't always easy, but James found his escape and his joy in music. That guitar quickly became part of who he was. By the time he was a teenager, his playing was already turning heads. People began to take notice, not just in his hometown, but beyond. He joined the Louisiana Hayride, a popular radio show in Shreveport, where many stars got their start, including Elvis Presley. Even at a young age, James stood out. He wasn't just another kid with a guitar, he had magic in his hands. Most teenagers dream of going to Hollywood. James didn't just dream it, he lived it. Before he turned 18, he packed up and left Louisiana, heading west to Los Angeles. There he joined the band of young teen idol Ricky Nelson, who was rising fast as both a TV star and singer. Burton became Ricky's guitar player, first playing rhythm, then quickly moving to lead guitar. His first single in the spotlight with Nelson was "Believe What You Say," and from that point on, he helped define Ricky's rockabilly sound. He ended up playing on almost all of Nelson's songs for over a decade, shaping the music behind the voice. But James's talent wasn't only seen in performances, it was heard in hits. Before working with Nelson, James had already made history. In 1957, he created the famous guitar riff for Susie Q, a song recorded by Dale Hawkins that would later become one of the 500 songs that shaped rock and roll. James actually wrote the song as an instrumental, but Hawkins added lyrics, and sadly, James was never given proper credit or royalties. Still, that riff became legendary and remains one of the most memorable in rock music history. As the 60s rolled in, James started working behind the scenes. He joined the TV show Shindig in 1965, which gave him national exposure. His days of steady touring with Ricky Nelson began to slow, but his work as a studio guitarist began to explode. He became what's known in the music world as a session musician, someone who plays guitar on other people's records. Quietly, often without credit, James played on song after song, backing famous names like the Everly Brothers, Merle Haggard, Glenn Campbell, Johnny Cash, Emmylou Harris, and John Denver. He also worked with rising rock stars like Elvis Costello, Graham Parsons, and even Joni Mitchell. One special moment came in 1967 when he played dobro on a song called "A Child's Claim to Fame" by Buffalo Springfield, featuring Richie Furay. It was another example of James's ability to cross musical styles from country to rock, folk to pop with ease and elegance. Over the years, James Burton's talent was finally recognized with many honors. In 2001, he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, a moment made even more special when the great Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones gave his induction speech. Later, he was honored by the Rockabilly Hall of Fame, the Musicians Hall of Fame and Museum, and in 2024, he received one of his proudest awards, a place in the Country Music Hall of Fame. Critics and fellow musicians agree, James Burton is one of the best guitar players to ever live. Rolling Stone magazine ranked him number 24 on their list of the 250 greatest guitarists of all time. He wasn't flashy, He didn't need wild solos or tricks. What he had was pure tone, feeling, and precision. James Burton played with many music legends, but Elvis Presley was without a doubt the most famous. So how did their paths cross, and what was it really like working together, working with Elvis Presley?
The band together, and I had to think about it, but the more I thought about it, I said, you know, I think I'd like to do that. So then we started playing Vegas full time.
In the late 1960s, James Burton was already one of the most respected guitarists in the music business. He had played with Ricky Nelson for over a decade, worked in the studio with many big names, and was constantly in high demand. In fact, he had to turn down some major opportunities, like joining Bob Dylan's first touring band and even playing in Elvis Presley's 1968 comeback TV special. James was simply too busy. But in 1969, Elvis came calling again. This time, he wasn't asking for a one-time appearance. He wanted James to be his lead guitarist for a brand new Las Vegas show, his first live performance series in years. And this time, James said yes. When James agreed to work with Elvis, he didn't just join the team, he helped build it. He put together a group of top-notch musicians to back Elvis. They became known as the TCB Band, short for Taking Care of Business, Elvis's personal motto. James was the band leader, and Elvis trusted him completely. Night after night, as Elvis dazzled audiences, he would often shout out, "Play it, James," whenever it was time for a hot guitar solo. And James always delivered, playing with precision, style, and fire. At the start of the Vegas shows, James played a standard red Fender Telecaster. But soon, he bought a unique, eye-catching pink Paisley Telecaster, a guitar with a colorful, swirly pattern that stood out on stage. At first, James wasn't sure Elvis would like it. But to his surprise, Elvis loved it. From then on, James played that guitar at every show with Elvis. It became one of his trademarks. From 1969 until Elvis's death in 1977, James played hundreds of shows with the King of Rock and Roll. They toured across the U.S., performing sold-out concerts and recording new material. Even while staying busy on the road, James found time to record his own music. In 1971, he released a solo album called The Guitar Sounds of James Burton, showcasing his incredible playing style. Even while working full-time with Elvis, James still found time to collaborate with other musicians. In 1975 and 1976, he joined Emmylou Harris's Hot Band, one of the most respected country rock bands of the era. He played alongside other great musicians like Glenn D. Hardin, who was also in Elvis's band, and Rodney Crowell. James enjoyed working with Emmylou, but whenever Elvis was ready to hit the road, James always came back to play for him. Some of the other musicians stayed with Emmylou, but James felt a deep loyalty to Elvis. Shortly before Elvis passed away in 1977, James was invited to perform on a John Denver TV special. It was a sign of how respected and in demand he remained, even while touring with one of the biggest stars in the world. James Burton's time with Elvis Presley wasn't just a job. It was a partnership built on trust, respect, and friendship. From that first Las Vegas show in 1969 to Elvis's final performances in the late 70s, James was there, always ready to play it when called. To this day, fans remember those moments. The image of Elvis turning to James, smiling and shouting, "Play it, James," has become a legendary part of rock and roll history. James Burton wasn't just part of Elvis's band. He helped shape the sound and energy of Elvis's live performances during his final years. Their musical bond left a mark that will never be forgotten. But when was the last time he saw Elvis? The last time they saw each other? James Burton and Elvis Presley.
And I think, actually, my personal opinion, that tour should have been canceled, because he was pushing himself.
James Burton had been at Elvis Presley's side for nearly 8 years, playing guitar as the leader of the TCB Band. Together, they traveled the country, shared late-night laughs, and made music that touched millions. They weren't just co-workers, they were close. There was deep respect, trust, and friendship between them. But like so many people in Elvis's life, James didn't know that their time together was coming to an end. Elvis had been on the road during the summer of 1977, performing a series of shows that would be his last. His health was fading, he was tired, bloated, and in pain, but he still wanted to be on stage. That was where he felt most alive. James Burton, as always, was there with him, guitar in hand. The final show was on June 26, 1977 in Indianapolis, Indiana. No one knew at the time that it would be Elvis's last performance ever. James remembered the show clearly. Elvis, despite everything, gave it his all. He smiled, he sang, and when he needed a hot guitar solo, he turned and said what he always said, "Play it, James." After the show, Elvis and James said their usual goodbyes. There was no big farewell, no long talk, just the routine of wrapping up another tour. Elvis was planning to rest at Graceland and then head back out soon. Everyone thought there would be more concerts, more cities, more music. James flew back to Shreveport expecting to see Elvis again in a few weeks. He never did. Just weeks later, on the afternoon of August 16th, Elvis Presley was found unresponsive in the bathroom of his Graceland mansion by his girlfriend Ginger Alden. Despite efforts to revive him, he was pronounced dead at 3:30 p.m. at Baptist Memorial Hospital in Memphis. The world was shocked. His family, his fans, and his band were devastated. When James got the news, he was heartbroken. The king was gone, and with him, a dear friend. James Burton often spoke of Elvis with warmth and love. That last show in Indianapolis became something sacred in his memory. The final time they stood on stage together, side by side, doing what they both loved. In interviews, James has said that he didn't realize it would be the last time, but he's thankful that Elvis went out doing what he loved most, performing for his fans. James wasn't with Elvis at the very end. That moment belonged to Ginger Alden, who was the last to see him alive. But James carries with him a kind of spiritual goodbye, the last chord played, the last nod from Elvis on stage, the last "Play it, James." And in his heart, that was the goodbye that mattered most. How exactly did Elvis Presley spend his last days? Elvis Presley's final day, August 16, 1977. The world remembers August 16, 1977, as the day Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, left us. But for those close to him, it started like many other days in Elvis's life. A quiet day spent at Graceland, his beloved home in Memphis, Tennessee. Elvis had just come off a tour and was getting ready to fly out the next day for more concert shows. He was tired but still driven by his love for performing. Over the years, Elvis had settled into a very unusual routine. He lived mostly at night, staying up until early morning hours and sleeping through the day. His home was dark and quiet in the daytime, just the way he liked it. On the morning of August 16th, Elvis couldn't sleep. Even after taking his usual medications, he was still restless. He was dealing with a toothache and other health problems, which had made rest even harder. He had struggled with insomnia, pain, and a heavy reliance on prescription pills for years. Elvis had spent part of the early morning with his fiancée, Ginger Alden, reading quietly and talking. At one point, he went into the bathroom with a book in hand, saying he was going to try to relax. Ginger stayed in the bedroom, expecting him to return soon. Hours passed. Around 1:30 p.m., Ginger noticed that Elvis still hadn't come out. Worried, she went into the bathroom and found him lying face down on the floor, completely unresponsive. Ginger screamed for help and tried to wake him. She was terrified. Others in the house rushed in. An ambulance was called, and within minutes, paramedics were on their way to Graceland. Elvis was rushed by ambulance to Baptist Memorial Hospital in Memphis. The medics worked on him during the ride, trying everything they could to revive him. But by the time they arrived at the hospital, it was already too late. At 3:30 p.m., Elvis Presley was pronounced dead. The world was stunned. The hospital later listed the cause of death as cardiac arrhythmia, an irregular heartbeat. It's believed that his long-term use of prescription pills and his poor health played a major role in what happened. Elvis was only 42 years old when he died. He had spent over 2 decades changing music forever, becoming one of the most famous and loved entertainers the world has ever known. Yet behind the fame and bright lights, Elvis had been battling pain, exhaustion, and the pressure to keep going. Even in his final hours, he was still trying to prepare for a new tour. still holding on to the hope of delivering more music to his fans. News of Elvis's death spread quickly. Fans gathered outside Graceland in shock and grief. The man who had once lit up the world with his voice, smile, and unforgettable moves was gone. But for many, his music never left. His voice still echoed from radios, record players, and jukeboxes across the country. Though Elvis died that day in body, his spirit and music live on. His final day reminds us that even those who seem larger than life can struggle with human pain. Elvis gave so much of himself to the world, his voice, his charm, and his heart. August 16, 1977 may have marked the end of Elvis Presley's life, but it was only the beginning of his legend. He was the king and always will be. After Elvis, the continuing journey of James Burton. When Elvis Presley passed away in 1977, the world lost a music icon and James Burton lost a dear friend and bandmate. For years, James had been the lead guitarist in Elvis's TCB band, standing beside him through countless live shows. Many wondered what James would do next, but James Burton was not finished. In many ways, his journey was just beginning. Not long after Elvis's passing, John Denver reached out to James. They had mutual respect for each other's work, and when they met in the studio to record Denver's album I Want to Live, the connection was instant. During those sessions, they spoke about forming a band, and soon, other former Elvis bandmates like Glenn Hardin and Jerry Sheff joined too. For the next 16 years, Burton became a key part of John Denver's music and tours. They recorded 12 albums together and traveled the world, bringing music to fans everywhere. James even brought along some of the same instruments he'd used with Elvis, including his famous 1969 pink Paisley Fender Telecaster and a backup dobro guitar. In 1995, they reunited one more time for Denver's Wildlife concert. Sadly, in 1997, John Denver passed away. James, heartbroken once again, spoke at his memorial service in Aspen, Colorado, paying tribute to another close friend and musical partner. Through the 1980s and beyond, James continued working with a wide range of artists. He played with Merle Haggard, Rodney Crowell, and Emmylou Harris. In 1986, he began recording and touring with Elvis Costello, helping shape a new sound for the British rocker. They worked together on and off for nearly a decade. One standout moment came when Burton appeared in the beloved Cinemax special Roy Orbison and Friends, A Black and White Night. The concert featured a lineup of music legends honoring Orbison, and James's guitar brought extra soul to the performance. In 1990, James decided to move back home to Shreveport, Louisiana, where his musical journey had first begun. But even from home, his career never slowed down. From 1998 to 2013, he played lead guitar in Elvis the Concert, a live show that reunited many of Elvis's old bandmates and featured video and audio of Elvis himself. Together, they brought the King's music back to life for a new generation of fans. In 2004, James recorded a follow-up album with Matt Lucas called Back in the Saddle Again, which blended rockabilly and country sounds. It was released in 2006. In 2005, James started the James Burton International Guitar Festival in Shreveport. It wasn't just about music, it was about giving. The festival raises money for the James Burton Foundation, which helps provide guitars and music programs for children, schools, and hospitals. It's one of the ways James gives back to the world that gave so much to him. James received many honors for his lifetime of music. In 2007, he was inducted into the Musicians Hall of Fame in Nashville as part of the Wrecking Crew, a group of elite studio musicians. In 2009, he joined the Louisiana Music Hall of Fame. That same year, he played on the Grammy-winning country song Cluster Pluck with Brad Paisley, Vince Gill, and other top guitarists. The song won Best Country Instrumental Performance at the 51st Grammy Awards. In 2010, Burton was asked to record guitar parts with Jerry Lee Lewis and Eric Clapton for the album Mean Old Man. He played on songs like You Can Have Her and Swinging Doors. He was also named one of Shreveport's 5 living legends. And in 2012, he performed in a special episode of A Prairie Home Companion at the Shreveport Municipal Auditorium, where his career had started decades earlier. In 2019, the TCB Band reunited once more for a special concert with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, blending classic Elvis footage with live performance. But in the years that followed, James faced serious health struggles. In 2020, just before the COVID-19 pandemic, he began working on a new gospel album with Jerry Lee Lewis and producer T-Bone Burnett, his first time in a recording studio since recovering from a stroke. Sadly, the album has never been released, and Lewis later recorded a different gospel project. In 2022 and early 2023, James was hit with a triple challenge. He caught COVID-19, was diagnosed with kidney cancer, and then broke his hip. Many wondered if he'd ever play guitar again, but James Burton is a fighter. In June 2023, James made a triumphant return. At the London Palladium, he led an all-star concert called James Burton and Friends One Night Only. Sharing the stage with legends like Brian May, Queen, Albert Lee, Van Morrison, Ronnie Wood, Elvis Costello, and Jeff "Skunk" Baxter, James showed the world he was still a force on the guitar. Later that year, he played on Brad Paisley's upcoming album Son of the Mountains, continuing his legacy in country music. In January 2024, James rode a Louisiana-themed float in the Tournament of Roses parade in Pasadena, California, a joyful moment after a hard year. He also received one of his highest honors yet, induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame. It was a long-awaited recognition of a lifetime of music, dedication, and heart. Even in his 80s, James Burton remains a hero to guitar players around the world. His style, sharp, clean, and soulful, helped shape rock, country, and rockabilly for generations. He's the quiet legend behind the scenes, always letting his guitar do the talking. After Elvis passed, James Burton didn't disappear from the spotlight. He kept doing what he loved most, playing music, helping others, and inspiring generations of musicians. His story goes beyond guitar solos and stage lights. It's a story of strength, loyalty, and staying true to your roots. Born in a small town in Louisiana, James had big dreams, and his guitar took him all over the world. Today, his name stands tall among music legends, and his influence is still felt every time a Telecaster rings out on stage. But even with all the fame and success, people still wonder, what does James Burton remember most about his time with Elvis Presley? Has he ever shared the real stories, the private moments, the friendship, the final days? Now at 85, James is finally ready to open up, and what he has to say just might surprise you. What James Burton said about Elvis Presley.
Watch, and on the back of the watch it says to James from Squirrely EP. He was such an idol for
James Burton spent 8 unforgettable years as Elvis Presley's lead guitarist. From the bright lights of Las Vegas to packed arenas across the country, James was by Elvis's side night after night, playing the music that thrilled millions. But for James, the best part of working with Elvis wasn't just the music, it was the man himself. James didn't talk about Elvis like a boss or a superstar. He talked about him like a friend, a brother, and a kind soul who cared deeply about the people around him. James often described Elvis as sweet, kind, and considerate. He remembered how Elvis would regularly ask, "How's your family?" or "Is there anything you need?" Elvis made sure everyone in the TCB band felt valued, not just as musicians, but as people. If a band member had a problem, Elvis would step in to help. Whether someone was sick, needed money, or was just feeling down, Elvis was there. He didn't do it for show. He did it because he cared. James also spoke about how much Elvis loved his fans. No matter how tired or stressed he was, Elvis would step on stage and give everything he had. James said that when Elvis sang, you could feel his passion. It wasn't fake. He loved performing. He loved making people happy. Elvis gave 100% every time, James said. He really wanted people to leave the show smiling. To Elvis, the band wasn't just background noise. They were partners in the music. James remembered how Elvis respected every musician in the TCB band and how he truly listened to their ideas. He trusted their instincts and gave them room to shine. Elvis loved how we interpreted his songs, James said. He gave us freedom, and that made the music special. One thing James Burton talked about often was Elvis's deep love for gospel music. While Elvis was known for rock and roll, Gospel was the music that truly moved his heart. James said that if Elvis were still alive, he believed Elvis would have focused more on gospel, recording it, singing it, and sharing its message with the world. Elvis felt something powerful in the gospel, James said. That's when you could see his spirit shine. James also shared a fun memory about the famous phrase, "Elvis has left the building." While touring with Elvis, he met Horace Logan, the announcer who first said the words. It started as a way to calm crowds after Elvis finished performing, but it quickly became one of the most iconic lines in music history. James remembered how the band would smile every time they heard it. Even years after Elvis's passing, James Burton continued to speak about him with deep affection. He didn't just remember the superstar in the jumpsuit. He remembered the warm-hearted man who loved his fans, loved his band, and loved his music. Elvis was more than the king of rock and roll, James said. He was a wonderful human being, kind, generous, and full of heart. For James Burton, Elvis Presley was not just a chapter in his musical career. He was a friend who left a mark on his life forever. And when James picks up his guitar, even today, a little bit of that spirit is still there. Because once you've played with Elvis and once you've felt the kind of kindness and energy he gave, you never forget it. And James Burton never has. Elvis didn't just show kindness to his friends and family. He extended that hand to total strangers. Let's explore his philanthropic nature. Elvis Presley, a legacy of giving. Elvis Presley is remembered around the world for his music, movies, and unforgettable stage presence. But behind the spotlight was a man with a heart just as big as his fame. Elvis wasn't just generous with his band or close friends. He showed kindness to almost everyone he met. From the early days of his success, Elvis made giving a part of his life, not just something he did once in a while. When he first started earning real money, Elvis began helping others in big, unexpected ways. He didn't want attention for it. Most of his giving was done quietly. He once paid off a woman's mortgage without telling her who helped. Stories like this were common in his life. If Elvis heard someone was struggling and he could help, he would. He had a special place in his heart for children and those battling illness. Elvis was a strong supporter of St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, even donating President Roosevelt's old yacht, the USS Potomac, to raise money. He also raised thousands of dollars for the USS Arizona Memorial at Pearl Harbor by giving a concert in Hawaii in 1961. Years later, during his worldwide Aloha from Hawaii concert in 1973, Elvis donated all the profits to the Kiki Lee Cancer Fund. That show was watched by over 1 billion people, yet Elvis didn't keep a penny. To him, using his fame to help others was more rewarding than making money. At Christmas, Elvis would quietly donate $1,000 to 50 different Memphis charities every year. He gave without asking for thanks, believing the holiday was about giving, not receiving. He also supported national organizations like the American Cancer Society, March of Dimes, and the Salvation Army. Elvis especially loved children. Fans often sent him teddy bears, and instead of keeping them, he donated them to children's hospitals so kids going through tough times could have something to hold. He also bought wheelchairs and helped pay for surgeries for people who couldn't afford them. He never hesitated. If someone needed help, Elvis stepped in. Even strangers felt his kindness. There are stories of Elvis giving away his own jewelry, coats, or even cars to people he barely knew. One man shared how he was struggling to pay for gas when Elvis, sitting nearby, quietly gave him enough for gas and groceries, with no cameras or crowds watching. After Elvis's passing in 1977, many wondered if this generous spirit would fade. But in 1984, his family and fans created the Elvis Presley Charitable Foundation. Originally called the Elvis Presley Memorial Foundation, it was renamed to better reflect its purpose, keeping Elvis's kindness alive. The foundation supports the arts, education, and children's programs. One of its most meaningful efforts is Presley Place, a safe housing center in Memphis for homeless families. It also offers help so families can rebuild their lives. The foundation also created the Elvis Presley Endowed Scholarship Fund at the University of Memphis. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.